All right, folks, the first quarter of the NFL offseason has been completed. The first big wave of NFL free agency. In today's show, we're going to discuss some of the biggest players that have the most to gain or lose in the upcoming NFL draft. The focus of today's show is to really talk about guys that could potentially lose a starting job, have more target competition, or in other cases, could really, really hurt if the team doesn't enhance the offensive line, doesn't provide playmakers. So we're going to break down all that and more on today's show. And today we're going to focus on the AFC South. Before we do, follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. We have baseball, basketball, hockey, and of course, football. So go check out all the great articles over on Razzball.com. But today, let's start the show. Players with the most to gain in the AFC South. All right, bringing in our resident AFC South expert, it's Keelin. Follow her at Keelin or 12-foot on Twitter. What's going on, Keelin?
Not much. That was super generous of you.
Oh, hey, listen, we're here to prop you up. We wanted to get you excited to talk about some AFC South teams, including your Titans, on today's show. But today we're going to be talking about some of the players with the most to gain in that division. So I broke it down a little bit to start off the show. I gave you a homework assignment. You stepped up. You gave me some great names. Let's jump right into it. At number 5, you want to talk about a player who could be coming off a very serious situation. Last year, missed the entire year because of a cancer diagnosis. But John Mitchy III of Houston, Texas. Let's talk about why he has the most to gain or lose in the NFL draft.
Yeah. So before the show, we were talking about how we were both super interested in John Mitchy III. He comes from Bama. So, he's going to be probably pretty good. But yeah, his rookie year was supposed to be in 2022, but he ended up getting a cancer diagnosis, which he is recovering from. And it's a pretty curable form of cancer. It's a leukemia. But yeah, right now he's ADP 174. And he was the 44th pick in the NFL draft. And we have yet to see him. So I'm mainly excited about him. I mean, not only because pretty much this is his real rookie year, but also if Houston, they went through this weird thing where they lost the first round pick in the end of the game. They could end up with potentially Bryce Young again, who is Mechie's old teammate. So that could be super interesting for him. And either way, no matter who they might wind up with, I think he's going to be super interesting to watch because we haven't seen him yet and just how he was in college.
I think John Mitchy is so when I was looking at this, I wanted to look at when the initial diagnosis happened. I look at Pro Football Doc, who does all the injury analysis, and he said it's probably going to take him about 2 years to get back up to full strength and speed. So like when I'm looking at this from a fantasy standpoint, it is like a guy who you probably get super cheap in Dynasty, and I really would be interested to float out a late second, early third round pick for a guy who's probably going closer to that top of the back of the first round last year. Because like you just brought up, Bryce Young, if Bryce Young lands there, by the way, his last year, John Mitchy with Bryce Young in Alabama, 96 receptions, 1,142 yards, 8 touchdowns, led the team in receptions. We have seen over and over again how many times it works when college teammates hook up again and they hit the ground running in the pros. So that's a big one. The other one is, look at the current roster. You have Nico Collins, which is a nice player, and also an aging Robert Woods and Noah Brown. So there's not that many intimidating. So when I'm looking at this, when you look at the 49ers scheme, right? Bobby Slovic, or whatever how you say his last name, comes from the Shanahan tree. You think yards after the catch. You think Deebo Samuel. That's not going to be Nico Collins. That's John Mitchy. So I do believe that this is a dynasty kind of play here. But what's your final thoughts about John Mitchy? Are you targeting? Have you actually thought about floating a dynasty pick for this guy or something?
I would personally. I will say I'm biased just because of Alabama. If Bryce Young goes there, I would be way more interested. I am concerned. I mean, obviously the cancer part, we want him to recover and hopefully it won't affect him. He also did tear his ACL at the end of his season. So that's a thing to worry about, but I would still be interested in it for sure.
Listen, and I think your dog agrees. I think that she's into it. He or she is into he's a Bama fan. He's excited for John Mitchy. Let's get into that. All right. Jumping down to number 4, it's actually Travis Etienne. And I want to talk about Travis Etienne because when I was looking at players with the most to gain, when you look at the Jags offense, I mean, we're talking about they might be one of the 2 or 3 teams where you can honestly say that all 5 of their skill position players are going to be drafted in fantasy. You have Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones. You have Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne. This is a loaded offense with a generational talent and a very good head coach coming into this season. And the reason why, so when I looked at Travis Etienne's season, I was surprised to find out like the narrative is, oh, Doug Peterson wants to go get multiple backs. He wants multiple running backs. That's going to hurt Travis Etienne. Did you know Travis Etienne was the first running back under Doug Peterson as a head coach to get over 200 carries in a season? So that to me surprised me. So like you think Miles Sanders, Ryan Matthews, LeGarrette Blount, whatever they had before Miles Sanders, like all those guys, none of them hit 200 carries in a season. Etienne was the first to do that. Now, if you look at the beginning of the year, remember he was coming off that foot injury where he missed his rookie year. After week 5, when he essentially took over the starting role, he averaged 15 carries, 2 receptions a game, 14.9 PPR points per game. That would have been RB11 last year. However, that being said, he doesn't have a passing game role, and I don't see, which is what is so ironic because he was so good at Clemson as a pass catcher. But when you have 3 good receivers and a tight end, it is going to be tough for him to kind of command targets. So I am a little concerned about some of the turnover on the offensive line, but the thing with him to gain the most is that Hasty, Dearness Johnson, and Snoop Connor and Dearness Johnson and Hasty are day 3 and undrafted free agents from the past. If the Jags don't go out and get a running back early or sign a, knock on wood, I don't have wood around me, I got a wood here, Zeke Elliott or Leonard Fournette type player, looking at him walking into another 15 to 17 touches a game, and that should perfectly justify a second-round pick on this guy over the second half of last year and then heading into 2023. So quick thoughts about Travis Etienne before we move on to number 3.
Honestly, this whole thing with the Jaguars actually like being good and doing stuff is still blowing my mind.
Right?
Woo!
Mr. Campers, by the way, back at it again. Good evening, Bobby and Keelin. Always a pleasure, sir. Great to have you back on as well. Let's jump down to number 3. We skipped it. We got through some of the warm-ups. Now we're going to talk about your Titans, Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans. Go ahead. Talk to us about Tannehill and why he has the most or gain to lose from the draft.
Oh, man. So, dang, where do I begin? Honestly, like I'm going to talk about the Colts later, but the Titans and the Colts are, they're rivals and they've actually been mirroring each other in a lot of things lately. But yeah, starting with the Titans, obviously it's no surprise Ryan Tannehill hasn't exactly been, he's usually not the guy you're aiming for so you get the job done. He's fine. He's serviceable, if you need one, but he's done well. He's done better than people expected. So, I think everybody's aware that he's on his way out at some point. It's been confirmed that he will stay this year, but I've also heard rumors that read rumors that the Titans might be sneakily looking for another quarterback. They have Malik Willis, but they may be looking for, a higher pick right now. So that could mean, Ryan Tannehill, maybe we'll say goodbye to him now. Maybe we'll say goodbye to him later. Maybe they'll just get a red shirt person so he can train them like he's been doing Malik Willis. I don't know. The other thing is that the Titans have had a terrible, terrible wide receiver kind of options. They have Treylon Burks, who you're talking about later, Bobby. But that's about it. They got rid of A.J. Brown, which was devastating. They have Treylon Burks, which is, good for him, but he's not A.J. Brown. So I've also heard the Titans are looking for other wide receivers. Mike Vrabel has said that very bluntly. He said, this is what we have to get or we're screwed. Beyond that, the Titans have gotten rid of most of their offensive line. So I think it's safe to say they have moved into a rebuild. I don't know what they're going to do with Derrick Henry. I don't know what they're going to do with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill, though, I would say has the most to kind of lose or gain from what happens in the draft. And if they get another quarterback, if they get wide receivers, I don't know. We'll see. I obviously hope they do, but not getting my hopes up.
I got to tell you, when you look at Ryan Tannehill's situation, so in 2020, he has his breakout season with you guys. And since then, all 5 starting offensive linemen and his top 4 receiving options from that team are gone.
Yeah.
That is essentially 100% turnover. Okay. Other than Derrick Henry, which he's great, but he's not a pass catcher.
Yeah.
How do you expect a quarterback to build how to build off that season when you completely gut the team around him? And then you're like, well, I guess that contract was terrible. He's not good. He's not. Oh, okay. Yeah. You gave him a Robert Woods coming off injury last year and Treylon Burks, by the way, who got hurt half the year and is a rookie. And it's just like, you know what? It's kind of embarrassing that the Titans did that because like,
oh yeah,
you know what? You don't get this guy have a career year and then gut the team around him and then start pointing fingers. No wonder.
Oh,
I'm glad they missed the playoffs because it's like if that doesn't get them going a little bit to get this, move on and start investing in their positions around him. So I do agree. Any final thoughts about Tannehill before we jump down to Treylon Burks?
No, I mean, I agree with you completely. It is like, move on or don't. Either way, make a decision because it's painful.
Yeah, and that's a good segue because why they didn't move on is why I think Treylon Burks has a bunch to gain from this NFL draft. Because Ryan Tannehill, you could say what you want about this guy, but just in that 2020 season was like the most efficient quarterback in football. And, I think that he's still a very competent quarterback. And I do think that Treylon Burks right now, by the way, is stepping into a situation where they released Hooper and they released Robert Woods. They retained Ryan Tannehill and they actually promoted Tim Kelly. And I think Tim Kelly is actually a very good play caller. Now, he was the former OC for the Houston Texans for a few years. And here's just a couple stats. His number one wide receivers in the 3 years as an OC. DeAndre Hopkins, 2019, 104, 1,165 yards and 7 touchdowns. Brandon Cooks, 81 receptions, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2020, Brandon Cooks, 90 receptions, 1,037 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So Tim Kelly has been able to promote at least one solid receiver. And I think Treylon Burks, by the way, no target competition right now. I mean, another player who I just want to throw out there who I'm going to do a solo video on is Chig Okonkwo, who I think is going to be – I think he's got probably the most to gain. If they don't go out and get another weapon – this guy could be an absolute stud. The most yards per route run amongst all tight ends last year, but that's just a sidebar. Thoughts about Burks and the rest of the Titans pass catchers?
I completely agree with you. There's literally I mean, he is the guy. He is the guy right now, especially, if they get rid of Derrick Henry, we'll see.
And it's really getting to a point where they've taken everybody away. So at this point, Tannehill, it can only get better from here, buddy. We're looking forward to it in the NFL draft. Let's jump down to number 1. This one's kind of surprising. I think that Michael Pittman, people are forgetting about Michael Pittman because of all the turnover and change in Indianapolis. They lost the quarterback situations in flux, new coaching staff. So why did you pick Michael Pittman, and why do you think he should be number 1 on our list?
Yeah, so I picked him, I mean, because of the points you mentioned, but also, he was kind of a sweetheart coming into last year. I remember a lot of people were psyched. They were like, oh, yeah, he's going to be good.
I wrote him love letters, so I was all excited for him. Too, so I get it.
I hope he wrote back.
He didn't. Clearly he didn't.
Yeah. I mean, he had a rough season, and it wasn't all his fault. I mean, like I said, this situation at the Colts is very similar to the Titans in a few ways, and that is that Matt Ryan, another guy, it's like you can say what you will about him, but also like Michael Pittman, they got put in a situation where they didn't have the protection they needed in the time they needed to run plays, and that made them look bad, and so it's kind of, I think that they got lost in that distraction of offensive linemen. What are we going to do about that? I'm interested because Matt Ryan's gone, and then the Colts, they're not, they're a little down the list on a quarterback, and I'm curious about who they're going to get. I've seen a few things like maybe they might trade Michael Pittman to the Bears or someone for more draft positions, or have some kind of trade package for a higher draft position or more of them. And then I've also seen a few other rumors like Lamar Jackson might go to the Colts. Same for the Titans. We'll see about that. I don't know. Yeah. There's just all kinds of trade rumors kind of surrounding Pittman as maybe a trade piece. And then, I don't know what's going to go on the draft with the offensive line for the Colts, but he would have a lot to gain with some serviceable offensive linemen there as well. So serviceable quarterback, serviceable offensive line. He has a lot to gain from that, or maybe a lot to gain from getting traded. We'll see.
Yeah. I think with Michael Pittman, so Gardner Minshew does offer some level of security. For example, they're not going to get Young. They're not going to get Stroud. So when it comes down to it, Last year, we had Malik Willis, by the way, was a top 10 pick to the Panthers. And guess what? He did not go in the top 10. So there's Anthony Richardson talk, Will Levis talk. I can honestly see the Colts saying, we believe Minshew. Minshew, who, by the way, was on the Philadelphia Eagles last year with Shane Steichen. So he has confidence in probably Gardner Minshew to say, you know what? And plus, I heard the QB class next year is better. So in reality, they could say, you know what? We could probably go get a stud defensive player or, fill another hole, let Gardner Minshew play this year if they wanted to do that. Now, Anthony Richardson, based on his pro day, probably going to be taken. And I think if Shane Steichen wants to mold that Jalen Hurts offense like he did in Philadelphia, that guy would be perfect for it. I'm not saying that he can't do that. But I think Gardner Minshew, at least in my opinion, does offer some type of floor. We've seen Gardner Minshew just a few years ago with DJ Chark, 15 games, 73 receptions, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. So we know that Gardner Minshew could produce a player. And I do like the idea of Pittman taking over that kind of A.J. Brown role in this offense.
Yeah.
Final thoughts about Pittman and the rest of these players before we close the show.
No, I think we're on the same page again. Going to be very interesting to see if there are any of these kind of trades leading up to, will we have another A.J. Brown situation this year?
Oh,
yeah. Hopefully it won't be my teams, but also still looking forward to seeing it.
Mr. Scampers, by the way, I got to appreciate you for jumping on and also bringing Kyle Phillips, who, by the way, if you watched our show last year, I was obsessed with him in Dynasty Leagues, and I picked him up a bunch. That didn't work out year one, but I do love the dart throw there. The Chig train, all aboard, folks. Get on board. I can't wait to break him down later this week or next week because I'm excited for him. Minshew over Wentz and Ryan. Mr. Scampers, we can't agree, and I agree 100%. Keelin, your thoughts? Would you take Wentz, Ryan, or Minshew?
Oh, well, I hate Carson Wentz, so definitely not him. Yeah, let's go for it.
Oh,
I hate him.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's end on that note, folks. That is it. That's basically our 5 players with the most to gain or lose from the NFL draft in the AFC South. Make sure you go follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. Jump over to Razzball.com. And Keelin, tell the people where they can find your content, what you got coming up next, and where they can follow you at.
You can find me here occasionally with Bobby, but otherwise I'll be doing baseball stuff. Happy opening day to all observers. And I'm writing about injuries over there. So every Saturday I have an article drop with baseball injuries. Sometimes it's gross. Sometimes I make mistakes in the article. Either way, it's always a good time.
I like it. I appreciate that. Once again, go follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. I want to thank Keelin again for joining the show. Don't forget to follow. We are out of here, folks.